Ladies and gentlemen, it appears that the SUMC, the Sony Universe of Marvel characters, should it tell you that that whole thing has not really caught on, considering the fact that I feel the need to clarify what that means every time I use the acronym? Probably. Anyways, it appears that the death of the SUMC has been greatly exaggerated. Everybody's been talking about how Kraven is going to be the last SUMC movie. There was that article from The Wrap that talked about how they were pausing it. Then that's kind of where all of that was coming from. But now Variety is coming out, and they're saying that it's not dead. So let's just read the article, see what they have to say. Maybe there's hope yet for the SUMC. All right. Even after Kraven the Hunter and Madam Web, Sony's Marvel movies aren't dead. Exclusive. Towards the end of Sony Pictures' newest Marvel movie, Kraven the Hunter, the titular hero, played by the maximum abdominal musculature. What the fuck? What? Played with maximum abdominal musculature by Aaron Taylor Johnson, experiences a chilling hallucination in which he's surrounded by a horde of spiders. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Kraven, which is most of you. It is a clear allusion to the character's greatest nemesis in the Marvel Comics, Spider-Man. It is also almost certainly the closest the character, or at least Taylor Johnson's version of him, will ever get to confronting the web-slinger. Kraven is projected to take in one of the lowest ever opening weekends for a Marvel superhero film, making it the third of Sony Pictures' unsuccessful attempts to spin off a secondary Spider-Man character into its own movie franchise following 2022's Morbius with Jared Leto and last February's Madam Web with Dakota Johnson. The looming box office failure almost certainly signifies the end of this endeavor at the studio, which one knowledgeable insider at Sony imputed to an industry-wide irrational exuberance about superheroes that has ultimately led to the overall diminishment of the genre's primacy as the leading force at the box office. I mean, like, it's one of those things where it's like, has too many superhero movies being made led to the decline of the superhero movie genre? Kind of, but I would just like to clarify that it's too many bad superhero movies. Like, that's the main problem, is that they've been bad. Not necessarily that there have been too many of them. Anyways, continuing. What it does not signify, however, is the end of Sony's Marvel Universe. All right, let's see. For one thing, technically speaking, there never really was a Sony Marvel Universe or a Sony Spider-Man Universe or any other official designation akin to the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the newly relaunched DC Universe. What are you talking about, Variety? The SUMC! The SUMC has been here this entire time! What do you mean? Sony has never approached its comic book adaptations with that level of intentional narrative, cohesion, as exemplified by the studio's casual, lowercase, and rhetorically ungainingly phrasing for its superhero films, Sony's universe of Marvel characters. I mean, I don't really understand that argument. Like, yeah, obviously I agree with them when they say that they've been incompetent in doing so, but like, this was intended to be an interconnected universe. Like, we saw at the end of Morbius, they absolutely were intending on connecting some of this stuff. So I'm not really sure what that paragraph is trying to say. For another, Sony remains deeply invested in making movies about Spider-Man, the beloved Marvel character who launched the current era of superhero cinema with 2002's Spider-Man. The fourth Spider-Man film starring Tom Holland is expected to start filming in 2025 in partnership with Marvel Studios. More on this later. The animated Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse is in production and will conclude the Oscar-winning trilogy focusing on Miles Morales, and Sony is producing a live-action Spider-Man noir series starring Nicolas Cage for Amazon Prime Video. I mean, this just feels like a weird article. It's like, yeah, obviously Sony is still working on Spider-Man stuff, but very specifically the Sony universe of Marvel characters, right? Madam Web, Morbius, Kraven the Hunter, the Venom trilogy. These were all supposed to be a part of the same universe. that endeavor seems to be being put on pause or potentially ending and being revamped at a later point. Like, this all feels like a bit like, it's technically not ending because they're still doing other things. But it's like, yeah, but those other things aren't the thing that's ending. This is a weird article by Variety so far. Sony insiders also fiercely defend the success of the 3 Venom films starring Tom Hardy, which have earned more than $1.8 billion worldwide. The latest film, Venom: The Last Dance, has earned the lowest grosses yet for the franchise, $473 million, especially against the $856 million global take for 2018's Venom. But The Last Dance cost $120 million, thrifty for a superhero movie, and it improved on the international grosses of 2021's Venom: Let There Be Carnage. So there's really no financial reason for Sony to stop making Venom movies anytime soon. But Venom, built around a deeply popular character with its own distinct imprint on the culture, also presented Sony with the false impression that audiences would flock to see a movie about any character without Spider-Man in the film. Yeah, I mean, like, that is an interesting thing. So if they've run the numbers and they're saying that with the Venom movies, technically the endeavor has been successful, it's like, okay, sure, but when all of your movies outside of Venom is just completely falling flat, then yeah, you're stopping. You're going to stop, because if you keep on going the way that you're going, even the success of Venom is not going to be able to outweigh all of the horrific failures that you've been having. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, I don't know. It seems like they're not really denying the fact that Sony is stopping the sump, right? They're pausing the sump. They've hit a brick wall with Madam Web, Morbius, and Kraven, and so they're stopping it. Like, I don't know. All of these characters are famous because they went up against Spider-Man, says exhibitor relations analyst Jeff Bach. Unfortunately for Sony, they had a taste of success with Venom, and that kind of spoiled everything for them, because they thought they could just spin off all of these characters. I don't think they realized that Venom could carry a franchise, whereas these other characters could not. To have Spider-Man in these films was to not have Spider-Man in these films was the fatal flaw. I mean, I still maintain that it's like, if Morbius was good, if Madam Web was good, if Kraven was good, like, I don't know that I necessarily agree that these films couldn't have been successes. Like, I don't know if I agree that they had to have Spider-Man in them for them to be successes. Like, obviously, would having Spider-Man help? Sure. But I don't know that, I don't like the idea of being like, what were we going to do? We didn't have Spider-Man. What were we supposed to do? It's like, well, the least you could have done was make a good movie, right? If you make a good movie and it flops, then sure, we can have conversations about the viability of this IP. But when you're not even bothering to make a good movie in the first place, it's like, you missed step one. Like, we can't even really have a conversation about the other steps when you miss step one. Sony is far from alone in aggressively expanding its superhero portfolio at the end of the 2010s, only to weather a sharp decline both in quality and audience interest in the 2020s. But the studio is caught up in a unique catch-22 of its own, making the unprecedented deal between the studio and Disney's Marvel Studios to share Spider-Man within the MCU, starting with 2016's Captain America: Civil War and 2017's Spider-Man: Homecoming. The partnership, in which Marvel Studios chief Kevin Feige and former Sony Pictures chief Amy Pascal produced the Tom Holland-led Spidey films for Sony Pictures, has been fabulously lucrative for Sony, with worldwide grosses topping $3.9 billion. But it also siloed off Holland's Peter Parker from any Sony projects that aren't officially part of the MCU. The corporate entanglements when studios try to work together are really hard, says one top executive with extensive experience in the superhero space. Sony has no flexibility. They have a cage that they have to work in, and they're just trying to make one good movie at a time. Well, that's debatable, but okay. According to one Sony source, the deal with Disney never precluded Sony from using Spider-Man in its movies that didn't bear his name. Yeah, I saw this on Twitter earlier, so I guess it came from this article. That's great. That's wait. So they could have been using they could have been using Spider-Man this entire time, but they just choose not to. Oh my, that's so crazy. That's so crazy. So like they could have been using like they could have made Andrew Garfield or whatever the Spider-Man of their universe, or they could have made Tobey Maguire the Spider-Man of their universe, or they could have cast a new Spider-Man, but they just chose not to. Why? That's so stupid. Sony from using Spider-Man in its movies that didn't bear his name. The Spider-Verse movies, profusion of Peter Parker's, Gwen Stacy's, and other various Spider people certainly bears that out. I mean, that's what I've been saying, right? Like, I've been under the impression of like, okay, well, it must be the case that because of Sony and Marvel's deal, Sony can't use Spider-Man because Marvel probably required that there be no competing like live action Spider-Man or whatever. But I've always been like, okay, so if you can't use Peter Parker, then why are you not making a live action like Silk movie? Or because I know they were making that Silk TV show. I'm like, why is that not a movie? Why are you not making a Silk movie? Have her be like the center of your universe around which all the other villain movies like orbit around. And it all sort of centralizes on a spider person. I've always been like, yeah, why are you not doing that? And it seems like they could have been doing that this entire time, but they just chose not to. Like, not only could they have been making live action Spider People movies, they could have just had another Spider-Man. I wonder, God, it's going to be so funny to see if everything works out for DC. Like, if they kind of realize, like, oh, like, let's just say that the Batman Part 2 comes out and it's successful, and the Brave and the Bold comes out and it's successful, and Sony's just like, wait, you're telling me that audiences aren't retarded? They could have understood that this other Spider-Man isn't the same Spider-Man as the Tom Holland Spider-Man? I wonder if they're going to have that realization. Oh no. That's so funny. But there was a feeling within the studio that audiences would not accept Holland's Spidey suddenly popping up in a live-action film that wasn't a part of the MCU, especially after Spider-Man No Way Home and the Marvel Studios' Projects Loki and Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness established definitive boundaries to the Marvel multiverse. What does that mean? It's explicitly the opposite. You could have Tom Holland fall through a bullshit multiverse portal and then he ends up in the Sony universe. You very easily, you actually can do that. That is actually something that you could have done if you wanted to. What are you talking about? What? That's so stupid. What? This seems to have had the greatest impact on Morbin Time, which was originally scheduled to premiere in July 2020, well before No Way Home and Doctor Strange 2. But due to the pandemic wound opening after them, wound up opening after them, the delay forced Sony into reshoots to account for how Michael Keaton's Adrian Toomes, introduced as part of the MCU in Homecoming, could be standing in the same room as Leto's titular living vampire, a character who isn't in the MCU. A fun conceit that didn't seem like a big deal until the multiverse suddenly made it one. So, if I'm understanding that correctly, so Sony was just going to be like pretending that they were in the MCU? Is that the case? It's the case that Sony was just going to pretend that Morbius was in the MCU and they were just going to have Michael Keaton in that movie. But then because of Spider-Man No Way Home, they decided they had to reshoot it and explain that Michael Keaton came from the multiverse or something. Is that why that after credit scene was so bad? Is that why there was a bunch of like deleted scenes from Morbius? You know what? That's actually starting to kind of make sense now, because if you remember in the Morbius trailers, there were scenes in the prison where Michael Keaton ends up at the end of No Way Home. And he's like, well, if it isn't Michael Morbius. And everybody was like, oh no, the Morbius is in the MCU. And then you watch the movie, and then at the end, it's actually Michael Keaton coming in through a portal or something. Because in No Way Home, they established that Venom came through a portal into the MCU. You know what? I actually am starting to understand how No Way Home might have fucked up Morbius. That's actually starting to make some amount of sense. That's funny. But even still, you still could have had a Spider-Man show up in the movies, in the same way that you had Morbius or Vulture come in through a portal. You just have Spider-Man come in through a portal. I'm just saying, if they could have had Spider-Man show up in these movies, and the movies would not have been, they could not have possibly been any more stupid than they already are. Jesus, dude. Dancing around Spider-Man without ever getting to use him also contributed to the feeling that these spin-off films were merely exercises in craven opportunism. You know what? The guy who wrote this article, they're having fun. So you know what? I'm not gonna get on their case too badly. You can feel the cynicism a mile away, says a veteran producer. They're grinding out product, and it feels like it. There's no quality control. I mean, that's obviously true. Privately, Sony insiders acknowledge that Kraven, Madam Web, and Morbius are creative and critical duds, even if they also insist that Morbius, which made $167.4 million globally, did turn a profit. What? I mean, if you say so, I guess. What was the budget? Morbius budget. Sony claims that Morbius was profitable despite earning over $160 million worldwide. The 2022 film reportedly had a production budget of around $75 million. How is that? That just doesn't sound reasonable. I feel like well, I don't know, because when you take into account marketing as well as the theatrical take, I feel like that sounds dubious. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know, man. That sounds dubious, but we'll see. Or I guess we'll take them at their word. I don't necessarily. I don't know. Moving forward, they say the studio will need to be more discerning about which, if any, of the studio's stable of Spider-Man characters should be elevated into their own movie franchise. There is a possibility as well. You could hire a different Spider-Man. Bach says it doesn't have to be Tom. Yeah, no shit. Sorry, this is I don't know how I opened up this menu on my computer. Okay. That's astounding. That's just like so astounding. They could have been using Spider-Man this entire time, but they chose not to. What the frick? What the flip? What the flippity dippity skippity dippity hippity? Like, they could have had their own Spider-Man and just kept these guys their as villains. Listen, listen, Sony, hire me. I will fix your universe. Okay, this is what you do. First of all, you have a Spider-Man. Okay, if you want to differentiate it from the MCU as to not confuse people, use a different Spider-Man that isn't Peter Parker, whether it be a live-action Miles Morales or Silk or any amount of the many Spider-Men in the multiverse that exist. But have a Spider-Person. Have the universe center around that person. Okay? Have the universe center around that Spider-Person, and they are like the lead of the universe. And if you're gonna make a villain movie, don't take away from what makes that villain interesting, right? Like, if you're gonna make a Morbius movie, make a horror movie. Just make a straight up horror vampire like slasher thriller. Like, we're now getting Nosferatu, but ever since Twilight, it feels like Hollywood has kind of stopped making vampire movies where the vampires are scary. Like if Sony had actually committed to Morbius and made like a horror movie where Morbius is like a monster, that actually could have been relatively interesting and unique in Hollywood. But instead, they were like, "Oh no, audiences won't watch a movie about a villain. We need to make Morbius a hero." Same with Kraven. It's like Kraven, at least from the Spider-Man game that Spider-Man 2. I'm not gonna pretend like I know that much about Kraven from comic books and stuff, but he's just like a guy who has like he's for the thrill of the game, right? He likes to hunt. He likes to hunt the most powerful creatures possible. So that's why in the second game he wanted to hunt Spider-Man, and then he wanted to hunt Venom and stuff like that. Like, don't turn him into a weird like animal rights activist. I mean, actually, I'm not gonna lie. I don't hate, actually, now that I really think about it, I don't hate the premise of Kraven the Hunter. Obviously, execution is terrible, but making a movie about a guy that hunts the hunters, that's actually kind of cool. You know? Like, he's going out and hunting poachers and stuff. You know what? I actually don't hate that premise. I'm not going to lie. You know what? I'm actually kind of okay with how they handled Kraven. It's the execution that was bad. That's the third step, okay? Make good movies. Make good movies. That's kind of important. That's actually kind of important. But in any case, right? If you're gonna make a Morbius movie, make it interesting. Make him a universal monster. That could have actually been interesting. And then use some of the characters where it would actually make sense for them to not be villains, right? Like, make a Black Cat movie. She's already not like an outright villain. Make a Silver Sable like spy movie. She's already not an outright villain. Like, these characters also already exist. Why are you making fucking Morbius? Why are you making Madam Web? Why? Like, there are actually other characters where it would kind of make sense for them to be like antagonist or protagonists, right? Like, Black Cat would actually make sense. Silver Sable would actually make some kind of sense. I don't know. Listen, let me know what you think. Are you as baffled as I am that they could have been using Spider-Man this entire time, but they just chose not to? Let me know in the comments down below, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.